In my last blog entry, I asked you to have a look at the video where Arnold Schwarzenegger talks about his 6 rules of success. And then I gave you some other sources that you could have also had a look at to extend what he is mentioning during the commencement speech. I asked you to look at his 6 rules of success and listen to what he says, to name them, and explain the meaning of each rule. I will go through each rule one by one and will give you a bit more background information that you have hopefully come up with as well. The first rule that he mentions is that you need to trust yourself. This is important. You have to figure out who you want to be and also what makes you happy, and then in addition to trusting yourself, you also need to have a vision. He mentions that in the other videos that I gave you as an option to watch. He mentioned this several times, that he thinks that it's very important to have a vision that you can follow. And this vision can be anything you want, basically, but it has to be a clear vision. So you have to have a clear goal where you want to go, because otherwise, he mentioned this a couple of times, that you would be like a captain on a big cruise ship, but you are the captain who doesn't know where to go, and then the cruise ship never goes anywhere if you don't have this vision very clearly. And he also gives his vision that he had, and that's why he turned into a professional bodybuilder, and then a successful actor, and also a successful politician. And he said his main motivation was that when he was growing up, he basically suffered from the aftermath of the Second World War, and he mentions that Germany and Austria as well have lost the war. He grew up in Austria, and the conditions were very bad, and there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of depression, because people didn't know where to go and what to do. And he says that it was very important to him, the vision that he had, that he wanted to escape this kind of life, this ordinary life. And he had this vision very early when he was exposed to something about, I think he said it was a video clip about the US. He had this vision that he wanted to make it there. And then he found, or he read a bodybuilding magazine, and then he saw that another bodybuilder who also came from a rather poor background, a British bodybuilder, has made it into actually a Hercules movie, and he identified with him, and that was kind of, the vision that he had for himself. That's what he wanted to be, and from this point on, he had a clear vision of where he wanted to go, and then he invested all the time and effort to reach his goal. And he also mentions that it is important to have short-term goals, but also long-term goals. That you have goals that are easier to reach, and then you have like a goal that is a bit more difficult to reach. And he also says always reach for the stars. So you always have to have the highest possible goal. But in all this, you should be, the most important thing is that you are able to trust yourself. The second rule that he mentions is that you should break the rules, and he means by that you should not break the law. That's not what it means, but rules that exist in society in general, that certain rules are like unwritten rules, are limiting what you can achieve, and that he says you should never think small but always shoot for the stars, which ties back to kind of rule number 1. And he says that this is important as well. And he also says that you have to think outside the box, and this is what he connects to the second rule, breaking the rules. So just because there's an idea in people's heads, which again also ties back to some other rules that he makes, that you have to break the rules in order to get somewhere. There was in his, if you look at, if you watch his documentary, he was talking about when he was serving in the military in Austria. There was actually this one time where there was a bodybuilding competition and he wasn't allowed to leave the barracks, and he still did, and he actually won the bodybuilding competition. And after this, even though he broke the rules, the army kind of made him like used them as their kind of mascot. So he kind of broke the rules and then actually gained something from it. And then he was allowed to work out, during his military training. He said, you need to break the rules, and in order to do this, you also have to accept that you cannot be liked by everyone. So what he means by that is that if you're always too worried about upsetting people or doing right by everyone, you basically won't get where you want to be. And he thinks that this is important as well. The third rule that he mentions is that you shouldn't be afraid to fail. He says that this is a very important rule, because if you're afraid to fail, you will never reach your full potential, and you will fall short because of this fear of failure. And he says that you have to have a desire to change your life to accomplish something big, and this is an important aspect of it. He also says that you have to accept that you cannot always win. You have to make decisions, and it's not really important if, like figuratively speaking, if you always win, but you might lose as well. But it's important in a given context that you make a decision and stand by it. He says you shouldn't be paralyzed by fear of failure, because, as mentioned before, if you're afraid to fail, and if you fear failure, you cannot reach your full potential, and otherwise, and you will also never push yourself. Exactly. And which ties back to the first rule, you should trust yourself. He says also in this context that you always believe in your vision, and this belief in your vision should be stronger than the fear of failure. The fourth rule is don't listen to the naysayers. He says that this is a very important rule because in his career, he says, people have doubted him many times. It started very early. When he was 15 and he started bodybuilding, his parents doubted him. They thought he was kind of crazy, he said, because he was working out basically whenever he got a chance. And also when he told them that he wanted to become a bodybuilder, everyone was doubting him and telling him that this is not for him and it cannot be achieved. And then later on, he had this happening in his life and career several times when he wanted to become an actor as well. The agents and managers were basically laughing at him because they didn't believe that he could make it into anything. And in the other video that I gave you as an option to watch, he talks about this in a little more detail, and then he says that one of the things that these agents and managers also told him regarding his acting career was that he will never make it with his Austrian accent. And then he did the film Terminator, and which I guess even you all know from the younger generation, that the sentence that he says would be I'll be back is one of the most famous movie lines, and James Cameron, the director of the film, said that this is possibly due to his accent and that it sounded basically machine-like. And what he says, what he experienced in his career, is that actually what happened is that everything that people told him was a liability about him, like his accents, his bodybuilding figure, that actually became an asset to him. And that's why he says it's important not to listen to the people who say it can be done, because just because something has not been achieved doesn't mean that it's not possible. Because people generally only believe something once it has been done, but that shouldn't shouldn't make you afraid, or shouldn't prevent you from trying to do something that has never been done before. And he says it actually gave him great pleasure to have all these doubters and people telling him that this can be done or that can be done, and then actually when he achieved it, he felt great about it, because he managed to do something that nobody thought he could do. And he says you should always tell yourself that you can. The fifth rule is work your butt off. He says that you should leave no stone unturned, that you should only start counting when it starts hurting. He gave this example that of something that Muhammad Ali, a boxer, said, one of the most famous and possibly greatest boxers ever, said that when he was asked how many sit-ups he does, he says he only starts counting the sit-ups when it starts hurting, because that's when it's important, that's when it counts. And this is something that Arnold Schwarzenegger identified with as well. So he said, if there's no pain, there's no gain, and there's also no way around hard work, and that you should sleep faster. He says there are 24 hours in the day, you should sleep 6 hours and have the other 18 hours available for whichever task or for whatever you want to do with it. This is something that he goes into more detail about himself as well in the other videos. He mentions that this is kind of the most important rule that he says, and he says it's like up to you as an individual to have good time management, and also what he mentions with no pain no gain, that you have to break through the pain barrier, and this takes courage from you, but only if you push your boundaries and your limits all the time will you actually achieve greatness. And he gave he gave the examples of himself when he said that when he started becoming a bodybuilder, he was also doing a lot of other tasks, and he said the 18 hours that are available from the 24 that you should use, or he used it for work, family, hobbies, and also to learn something new. For example, you could learn a language. And he says that people have problems with committing to something, and he says it's very important, if you want to do something, then take an hour out of the day from these 18 hours and make it happen, basically. And when he came to the US, he said he was working in construction. He was still working out 5 hours a day, and then at night he was taking part in acting classes between 8 and 12 midnight, and also went to school. So he was making the most of his time. And he says that this is this is the most important rule, because everything else will fail if you're not willing to put hard work and effort into it. Rule number 6 is give something back. He mentions this several times, that this is very important to him, because this is something that he experienced, that it's important to find time to give something back, because reaching out to people will bring you more satisfaction, he says, than anything else you have done. And he mentions that, for example, what he was doing is that he was training Special Olympians, and he also supported the implementation of after-school programs for disadvantaged students. So he did a lot of charity work as well, and tried to give something back. And he said this was important in his career as a bodybuilder, as an actor, and also later on as a politician. So these are the 6 rules of success that he has. Of course, this is just, this is what he says and what he mentions, and this is a bit of my interpretation as well. Maybe you had some different answers for certain things. That's absolutely fine. Then the second question that was on the worksheet was, what does he mean when he says you cannot climb the ladder of success? And I guess this is something that goes back to the rule number 5, work your butt off, that he means by that you need to invest and put in the hard work and effort so that you actually go somewhere. Because if you're just lazy and sit around, you will never reach anything. Question number 3 was, what is the most important rule and why? It's rule number 5, work your butt off, because without hard work, all the other rules won't be effective and nothing else will either. The fourth question is a personal question to you. Do you think that he is right? Would you agree with all his points? Is there anything or any rule you do not agree with? This is completely up to you. You could say, yes, I do not agree that you should only sleep 6 hours a day and use the other 18 hours to work and for other things. That would be totally fine. He also mentions that these are his rules of success. They worked for him. They probably work for anyone if you follow these steps as well. But like I said, it's up to you really. This is an open-ended question. There's no right or wrong answer in this respect. Yeah, this should just get you thinking about what you believe in.